The country is still coming to terms with the horrific aftermath of the sudden crash of Air India 171 immediately after takeoff from Ahmedabad as it was headed to London. We now know officially that the pilot in command, Captain Sabharwal, did not even have 30 seconds to make an intervention. In fact, it was a precise 32 seconds from takeoff to crash time. The Aviation Ministry has also held its first press conference after the crash, and it has officially released what Captain Sabharwal's last message to the ATC, to the Air Traffic Control Tower was. And as we have been reporting, in that time, all that Captain Sabharwal could say was Mayday, Mayday at 1:39 p.m. when the plane would not lift above 650 feet. I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo Story. Our focus today continues to be on the aftermath of the horrific Air India crash, a crash that has stunned the aviation industry around the world. The crash involving the 787 Dreamliner, manufactured by Boeing, is the first major crash involving this aircraft. But now, according to the government, there is to be extended surveillance of all 787 aeroplanes in service in India. There are, let me actually look at the figure here, there are 34 of them in use in India, and the aviation minister has announced moments ago that all of them will be placed under extended surveillance. This is not a grounding of the fleet, but the planes will be subjected to certain specific checks. 8 of the aircraft, according to Air India, have already been subjected to this scrutiny. We also, as I said, have more details now, not just of the pilot's last Mayday message, but there are also questions mounting as to whether the pilots of Air India 171 are being made into easy fall guys as questions mount about an aviation mystery. The easiest thing, as the pilot fraternity will tell you, is to point fingers at a dead pilot who's no longer around to defend him or herself. We know that the pilot, there you see him, Captain Sabharwal, had less than actually 15 seconds or less than 20 seconds to make an intervention, because the entire journey of AI 171 from takeoff point to crash was between 32 and 36 seconds. We put a timer on it. We felt it was 32 seconds. The ministry today says it's 36 seconds. But either way, the captain had 15 to 20 seconds to make an intervention. He's gone now along with those passengers. The death toll has risen to a 274. This includes fatalities on the ground, raising serious questions about why there were populated areas, constructed areas near the airport to begin with. There's a lot to talk about. You can see the images of the captain, some of the cabin crew members there who are no more. Their families mourned, along with more than 200 other families. 274 is now the death toll, making this one of India's worst aviation disasters in 30 years. Let me introduce our 3 very distinguished guests today as we try and decode what happened, why it happened, and what, if anything, we can learn from it. It's still too early. The black box will have to be decoded. The investigation will take some time. We will avoid speculation and stick to the hard facts as much as we can. I want to welcome to the program Captain Rakesh Rai. His experience and perspective is really critical here because he's actually commanded the 787 Dreamliner, the plane in question, the plane that crashed, and the fleet which is now under what the ministry is calling extended surveillance. We're also joined by Dr. Aditya Paranjape. Dr. Paranjape is a specialist in the Aerospace Engineering Department of Monash University, and it's good to have him with us. And also joining us is Air Force veteran, Group Captain D.N. Bajpai. Welcome to the program, sir, and good to see all of you. Before we start, I just want to replay and maybe play for the first time for some of our audience members who haven't actually seen this CCTV footage. This is the footage that captures the entire journey of AI 171, a journey that lasted less than a minute, didn't even touch 40 seconds. And this tells you how little time the captain in command actually had to do anything at all. Take a look. Chilling to watch even 2 days after the mishap, and this will remain in our minds for very, very long. Captain Rai, I'd like to start with you. You've actually commanded this aircraft, the 787 Dreamliner, a Boeing manufactured plane, the entire fleet now under what the government is calling extended surveillance, not being grounded, but certainly being put under the microscope. What do you think we know? What can we at this point, with responsibility, rule out, and what do we still have to consider about why this plane literally sank? In fact, sinking is the word that the ministry used in its briefing today. Captain Rai.
Looking at the takeoff roll and the liftoff, it appears to be a very normal takeoff, and the liftoff was at a prescribed angle, and the aircraft left the ground at a decent rate.
Yeah.
After that, what has happened, why the gear was left down, why the aircraft has started sinking is all conjecture. Looking at the aeroplane from that distance, the video is not very clear. It's grainy. One cannot make out the flap configuration. One cannot actually say that at this point this engine has failed or this power has come off on this engine. It's practically impossible. It's only the DFDR decoding which will tell us exactly what happened. So looking at the video, there is very little one can say, and only thing which is noticeable is that it appears to be a very normal takeoff. Other thing is that Ahmedabad at that time must have been very hot, afternoon takeoff, temperatures high, heavy aircraft with a lot of fuel. So the performance of the aeroplane in such conditions, it takes quite a beating. But looking at the Dreamliner, very modern aeroplane and very powerful aeroplane, even with one engine failure, it's capable of taking off with that kind of load in those temperatures. What you talked about the timing, we need to reduce 4 to 5 seconds from the timing. 32 seconds. We need to take out 4 and 5 seconds for the reaction of the pilot. It takes 4 to 5 seconds to ascertain what has gone wrong. So if you take out 4 to 5 seconds from 32 seconds, that Captain Sabharwal had precisely 27 seconds to decide what needs to be done. And 27 seconds, when so many things are happening at a rapid rate, appears like less than 10 seconds actually.
Thinking about that the commander, Captain Sumit Sabharwal, would have had 27 seconds, and those 27 seconds would have felt like 10 seconds. It actually sends a chill down my spine to think of anyone being in that situation. I mean, just horrific, Captain Rai, to imagine. I want to build on that to ask you. I've been a bit disturbed with by the ease with which certain sections of social media have started pointing fingers at a pilot who is no longer alive to give his version of what's happened, right? The easiest thing in a crisis like this is to blame a dead pilot because he's not there or she's not there. And it really bothers me that it seems insensitive and almost callous, and it's the easiest narrative to hold on to. Could you elaborate before I open this up on what 27 seconds that feels like 10 seconds means for a commander on this particular plane?
See, when something goes wrong, first of all, it takes 4 to 5 seconds to ascertain that something has gone wrong. And then you have to look at the instruments, see what is going on. You have to consult your co-pilot, what he thinks what's going on, and also control the aeroplane. And we have a philosophy of navigate, and communicate. The first thing is to fly the aeroplane. The second thing is to navigate. And the last thing is communicate. That is why I think the Mayday call must have come towards the end of the, when he is absolutely helpless, then he has given a Mayday call that something is wrong.
Yeah.
So in that much of time, controlling the aeroplane, ascertaining what has gone wrong, and also taking help of the co-pilot, it will actually seem like 10 seconds.
And what does that do, like in terms of your training? Just before I come to Group Captain Bajpai, I mean, can anyone train you for this, Captain Rai?
See, in the simulator, we are trained for these kind of emergencies, and when something like this happens, there are memory items which need to be carried out. Carrying out the memory item itself will take about maybe 5 to 6 seconds and maybe 10 seconds. So those are memory items which need to be carried out immediately after any incident or anything wrong goes with the aeroplane. So carrying out those memory items, flying the aeroplane, and taking care of everything else, it's a very heavy load in that kind of a situation. And he did not even have sufficient height in hand. He just had about 625 feet. Now, if you look at 625 feet, things may have gone wrong before that. It's the momentum of the aeroplane which has taken it to 625 feet. So the time available and the height available is dismal. What they say, the height above you and the runway behind you is of no use.
Yeah. So this leaves us with many questions and very few answers at this point about what has happened. Group Captain Bajpai, if I may bring you in now, you've heard Captain Rai, who's actually flown this very aircraft. And I think the point he's making is it would have been a 10-second response for Captain Sumit Sabharwal. But given that the plane did not have height, we've seen planes that are cruising, even able to land on one engine failure, right? This plane did not have that opportunity to actually lift at all. We have seen, certain commentary, particularly by foreign pilots, talking about a possible human error. And I just think we should be very careful before, of course, all options will be considered in the investigation, but we should be very careful before we do any armchair commentary about human error, because as Captain Rai just explained, the commander would have had 10 seconds, realistic 10 seconds. By the clock, 27 seconds, mentally 10 seconds. Your take, sir, Group Captain.
Madam, at this moment, uh, in my personal opinion, to make any comment on this particular accident will be extremely difficult. As Captain Rakesh already said, we have hardly got any evidence. However, whatever evidence based on this video, to me, what is happening, I will also go with available evidence and what is hypothesis I can make out. To me, here two clear-cut evidence is there. One is landing gear is down, which is little abnormal. Second, let me admit, the video shown by you in is one of the most clear video with respect to video shown on any other news channel. With that, I am getting a perception the configuration of aircraft at the takeoff point was in order, which is further substantiated by Captain Rakesh that takeoff roll and takeoff seems to be perfectly in order. After committing these two things, I come back on the timeline, which you said 36 seconds. Captain Rao said it is 10 to 15 seconds, lower end 10 seconds, higher end 15 seconds. I would like to further reduce this timeline because you said it started from the takeoff point. So some time must have been consumed in takeoff roll also. And after that, when aircraft left the ground, it was absolutely normal for some time. No captain will imagine that he is going to face any emergency on critical phase the way if everything is moving normal. Are you getting me? After that, he will apply 4 to 5 seconds for his reaction time because it will be a immediate surprise to him what has gone wrong. Okay, ma'am.
Yeah.
Come back to I will further elaborate on my hypothesis. I will come back to your very first point. It's very easy. The way social media, a few people in social media is blaming the captain of the aircraft or questioning his airmanship.
Yeah.
Because the poor captain is not available to defend himself, which is grossly against natural justice. Okay.
Absolutely.
Please be rest assured, the captain was TRI, type rated instructor. He had more than 8,000 hours. All the experience Almighty has given to his wisdom, he must have applied to save this aircraft to which he was commanding and all the passengers who are sitting in the aircraft on his behalf. He
Yeah.
must have tried all the possible knowledge, skill, wisdom, experience. Now I come back to my hypothesis. I will
Yes.
rule out one by one.
Okay.
Some social media people say there could be a possibility both engines had a bird injection, which is based on the theory which Captain Rakesh will agree to me that Ahmedabad is one of the airport in our country which is highly prone to bird activities, one of the
Hmm.
highest in the country, which I will negate because it is quite because there was one accident, Hudson River accident, Captain Rakesh will be knowing very, very well,
Yeah.
which was investigated and concluded it had both the engine bird injection. But
Mm-hmm.
bird injection takes place when birds are flying in the fox, in a group when they are flying. It's
Right.
quite unlikely when the ground temperature is so high and the bird fly in the fox only in the early morning or evening 5 to 7 when insects try to come out of the soil. So that
Mm-hmm.
possibility in my hypothesis is out. Now, second hypothesis in social media is strongly going on about sabotage. The sabotage, one possibility in sabotage has got various forms. One
Mm-hmm.
form, somebody planted the bomb. That hypothesis also goes down. In such scenario, there will be a explosion in the aircraft in air, which is not available in the evidence form to us in this video. However,
Right.
I am holding myself for time being other forms of sabotage with reference to during Israel-Gaza war, the pagers and the mobiles were exploding. MH370 accident on Malaysian Airlines aircraft is still
Yeah.
there is one. Till now, it could not be concluded. Till now, the root cause of that accident is not established. However, one hypothesis is still in the market. There was some software attack and the command of the aircraft was taken over through cyber
So
attack.
may I intervene here, sir? Because if I'm understanding you correctly, you are saying bird hits are unlikely because of the reasons you gave. You are saying
Many,
an obvious sabotage of an explosion kind is unlikely, but you do not rule out other forms of sabotage,
absolutely correct.
like a cyber attack. The third, because I will go to Dr. Paranjpai on this, but very briefly, your take on this: engine failure, dual engine failure. What do you say on this?
There is a possibility or either dual engine failure or this also could be coupled with the cyber attack because there is a Captain Rakesh himself had been a commander over there. He will agree with me there is a electronic governor which is controlling the engine in case if somebody takes control over there and the fuel supply engines are starved over there. But in that case
Okay.
also, I wanted to go point by point. There will be a flame out of the engine. There is no flame visible. So evidences based my hypothesis, I will further go ahead. Kindly let you give to other panelists
Yeah.
his time.
So I want to recap a couple of things before I come to Dr. Paranjpai. Captain Rai says that the pilot in command effectively had 10 seconds to respond. 27 seconds by the clock, but 10 seconds to respond. Group Captain Bajpai says it is against the principles of natural justice to point a finger at the pilot who is not alive to defend himself, especially in the absence of evidence. But he picks up the 3 4 major theories. Bird hit rules those out. Dual engine failure, we don't know. Unlikely is what everybody says for both engines to fail together. Cyber attack, he's not ruling it out. Now I'll come to Dr. Paranjape. When we were talking yesterday, you said sabotage is the last option you'd consider. Group captain says he's not talking about the kind of sabotage where a bomb is set off because there was no explosion in the sky, but there could be an electronic, cyber attack. He will not rule that out. It is a big aviation mystery, much like the disappearing of the Malaysian Airlines plane, the answer to which has just not been found till this date, right? Aditya, go ahead with your perspective on everything you've heard.
Okay. All right. So first off, just want to thank the fellow panelists. There's a lot that I learned from them, especially coming from the perspective of a senior captain and a senior captain who's been with the Air Force and in charge of safety. So let me still stick with a perspective that comes from an engineer. And as we did yesterday, Barkha, I want to still stick with what we've seen in the video. I think we all agree that the rotation was normal. The initial climb out was normal. There is no issue there. I did talk yesterday about dual engine failure based on what we saw in the second video, which somebody else has recorded, showing how the plane
we have
descended.
that. We have that.
Exactly.
We have that. Let's show that the
So,
first video that we got, if we can, please. Yeah, go ahead.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
There it is. There it is.
So correct. So what we argued here was this doesn't look like the plane's falling out. It's sinking. It's not a stall. It looks like it's an engine out flight. We also
can you explain that? Can you explain that?
Yeah. So if a plane stalls, the flow on the wings is severely disrupted. So the wings produce very little lift. They produce a lot of drag. And what happens in that case is that the plane's flight path starts becoming increasingly vertical. It can get to as high as 45 or 50 degrees or even steeper than that. Now, what's interesting is the following. If you assume the flight speed as about 170 knots, I'm sorry, I'm going to put a little few numbers in here.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. With a descent angle of 45 degrees, 50 degrees, that is consistent with a stall, your descent rate would be in the higher thousands of feet per minute. I think this is a number that I think both pilots would agree. These are numbers that are not unheard of. However, the normal descent rate of an airplane as it comes into the approach before landing, where everything is normal, is 750 feet per minute. All right. This airplane went from 400 odd feet above ground level to a crash in approximately 15 to 20 seconds, which gives us a descent rate of 1200 feet per minute or somewhere in that ballpark. That's not consistent with a stall. It's consistent more with engine out. Second point in that video.
What do you mean engine out? A failure of the engines?
A failure of the engines, exactly. So so I should be careful. It may not be engine out. It's just that engines are not producing any thrust. Now, whether that means they're idling or they have shut down is a matter of conjecture at this point.
Okay.
Second, we also saw that the plane's rudder is by and large neutral. It hasn't been deflected to one side, and the plane's still flying straight and level, which means it has to be dual engine out. Otherwise, you'll have asymmetry. And you'll need the rudder to balance the airplane, correct? So that's the basis of my claim that it's most likely dual engine failure, and by failure we mean it could be either out or idling. It's not producing enough thrust. Now let me roll back to the first video because this is a point that didn't exactly strike me as very obvious yesterday until people started talking about it, and that's the landing gear. Now raising the landing gear is an energetically expensive operation. All right. If the engines go out, there is not enough power to raise the landing gear, right? So even if the pilot were to have raised the landing gear in the cockpit, look, that sticks in front of him. I don't know what he's done. That will become evident only when we look at the flight data recorder. Even if he moves that stick up, the landing gear is not going to respond because there is not enough power to raise it. All right. So that's the other side that I think.
So can I translate that into more accessible general public language? Basically, what you're saying is that the landing gear, which has been pointed out wasn't raised, and that's unusual, that the reason for that may have been if the engines were not producing enough thrust. Is that what you're saying?
It's a possibility. It's absolutely a possibility.
Okay, I can see group captain disagreeing, but I'll let you complete your point. First come to Captain Rai and then come back to group captain Bajpai.
All right. Okay, that's fine. I mean, I'm happy to take if someone takes a different view, it's something we all learn from.
Yeah.
It's still a matter of hypothesis. And the last thing I did, I took the liberty of doing it, which was, and here's where I think both of our other panelists can contribute, which is under that condition, what's the best that the pilot could have done, okay, in terms of actions, or the flying captain, or both of them together. Now, what's happened inside the plane is a black box. We don't know what has happened. Engines out, whatever. We don't know that. But what would that translate into in terms of the trajectory of the airplane, right? Look, assuming it's dual engine out, the best that the pilot's going to try and do is buy themselves the best possible time, to land safely, to execute some engine restart, whatever it might be. But the key idea is they want to buy time. All right.
Yeah.
If the engines are out, the best way to do it is to glide as far as possible. All right. You can't raise the landing gear.
How do you glide How do you glide below 650 feet? How do you glide?
Gliding here is a technical term. Glide just means that you configure the airplane at the right sort of angle so that you get the most possible distance to sink. Gliding is not. I don't mean to conjure up images of a glider, in the sense of like this
all right.
long-winged
Okay.
This is an airplane that is still sinking, but depending on a very specific angle known as the angle of attack, your glide rate can change. So you want to hold the plane in a configuration that gives you the best possible glide rate. All right. And the only thing that you have to play with now is the stick that's in front of you that changes the elevator deflection at the back, orients the plane's nose, and the flaps. All right. Yeah. And even then, the best possible glide rate that you can get on a 787, I won't commit to a number, but when I just try to do some back of the envelope calculations, it's some 1,000 odd feet per minute, maybe 1,200, 1,300 feet per minute is what I think is the best you can get when the landing gear is down. And so even if we don't know what the pilots have done, my guess is, even had they done their absolute best with dual engine out, I don't think the outcome would have been very different if the engines failed to restart, is what I'm saying. So I'm saying, so just to wrap up, personally, all I'm saying is, based on the available evidence, you cannot blame the pilots, because even if you assume that the pilots did the best possible thing, you see the same outcome.
Yeah.
So you really can't blame the pilots there.
So I want to bring in Captain Rai here. There is a video that is by a certain Captain Steve that is being shared across social media. Blaming the pilots is one possibility. You've heard Aditya Paranjape saying, based on available evidence, you cannot blame the pilots, and and you have spoken about the very, very little time that was available to the commander, in which case, if you don't consider this to be an act of sabotage, as Group Captain Bajpai has suggested, then the only option, please correct me if I'm wrong, this is not my expertise, the only option that we're left with if we don't contemplate sabotage is dual engine failure, or the lack of the engines producing thrust, leading to the pilots not being able to raise their landing gear and leaving them with no time, as you have already pointed out, to make any other choice. Captain Rai, what did you think of this scenario building by this Captain Steve, blaming the pilots as one of the scenarios?
One of the points which Aditya raised about not able to raise the landing gear, in this aeroplane we have a system called RAT, ram air turbine. Moment both engines fail, it gets deployed. And in this aircraft, the RAT provides hydraulic power for flight controls and landing gear, but not for electricity, unlike other airplanes.
Right.
So landing gear theoretically can be raised with the RAT deployed. But the question is, with that kind of small window available to the pilot, did he have enough time to configure the aeroplane for the longest glide possible? Because he has just barely 10 seconds to act.
Yeah.
The only thing I can say is that he's looking at the way the aeroplane has gone into the ground. He has maintained wings level beautifully, and he has tried to, land the aeroplane straight ahead of any kind of obstruction, hoping like hell that, okay, there is some open space in front where he can touch down. That's all. Otherwise, he had no time to configure the aeroplane for the longest glide possible. Theoretically, yes. What Aditya has said, that yes, the aeroplane can go into a glide mode, and with the undercarriage up, it can get a rate of descent of about 1,000 to 1,200 feet per minute. But the question is, did he have time enough to think of all that?
Yeah. So can I ask you, therefore, does it hurt, on a personal note, does it hurt you that there is such alacrity with which the pilots will be blamed? They're not even there to defend themselves, with which human error will be considered as a possible scenario. Everybody will hold on to it rather than have larger conversations about, I don't know, for example, Boeing. Please go ahead, Captain Rai.
You have raised a very good question, and I have been very vocal about it. Here, the pilot has paid with his life for whatever has happened, whatever be the reason behind that.
Yeah.
In our system, we often see that if a pilot makes a mistake, we hang the pilot. The punishment comes very severe and very prompt. But whenever a pilot does a good job, I have had a lot of my colleagues in Air India. With God's grace, I have never faced a very serious situation, but there are many of my friends who have faced very serious situations, handled emergencies beautifully, saved so many lives, but there has been no reward or award, not even a letter of appreciation. So the general trend is to blame the pilot as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody telling me that, okay, you take the plane from Delhi to London and don't make a mistake. If you make a mistake, we'll hang you. But what about the good job done?
Yeah.
Nobody appreciates
Absolutely.
that. Yes. So that's the general mindset. So it's just too bad. I mean, people need to think about it.
You know, I asked you this because somebody said that you, and I was pretty sure you wouldn't take this position, because I was criticizing TV channels for, you know, platforming this Captain Steve, who's wearing a uniform like an actor in his home while doing these videos, and blaming the pilots as a possible scenario. And somebody wrote to me saying even Captain Rice agreed with Captain Steve on this. And I said, well, he's coming on my show and I'm going to ask him this. So I want to ask you. Yeah, go ahead, sir.
We were discussing different scenarios possible.
Yeah.
That was not to apportion blame on anyone. And right at the beginning, I had very clearly said that we are only thinking about possible scenarios. We are not blaming anybody. We will get to know the truth only after the DFDR comes out. This has been maybe misconstrued as a statement from my side, but that's not right.
Do you feel bad as someone who's commanded this plane that the pilots are being blamed in sections? I won't say everybody's doing it, but in sections of the media?
Yes, there are sections in the media who are blaming the pilots, but in general, the general public has very little knowledge about aviation, and practically no knowledge about what happens in the cockpit. And to think about what procedures we follow, what standard operating procedures are, how do we handle emergencies, is way beyond for a general public to understand. So lack of knowledge may be one of the reasons why people are so trigger happy and to blame the pilots.
Yeah, it's terrible. I really feel agitated by it, because it's lazy commentary. And as you said, the pilot has also gone down with the plane. And, you know, imagine if you had to take a decision in 10 seconds, which is realistically the window that the pilot had in this case to take a decision. Before I get Group Captain and Dr. Paranjape to respond, I also want to play out a statement by the Aviation Minister. The 787 fleet is now under what the government is calling extended surveillance. What does that actually mean? What needs to happen? Is this a panicked response? Does it have to do with the aircraft? Does it have to do with something else? We simply don't know. That's the problem. Take a look at what the Aviation Minister had to say.
I also like to say that we have a very strict safety standards in the country also. And many, including the ICAO, many international organizations have also time and again established that. We do have a very strict protocol, robust protocol, which we follow every time. But even after, when the incident happened, we also felt that there is a need to do an extended surveillance into the Boeing 787 series. So from the DGCA, we have also given an order to do the extended surveillance for the 787 planes. There are 34 in our Indian aircraft fleet today. I believe that 8 have already been inspected, and with immediate urgency, all of them are going to be done. And furthermore, as the investigation is going to proceed and the report is going to come, whatever necessary steps are needed to be taken, we are going to ensure that without any hesitation, we are going to improve every necessary thing that is.
Right. So let me bring in Group Captain Bajpai now. There is also, and again, not to create any sort of panic or alarm, the 787 Dreamliner is not used only by Air India, it's used by airlines across the world. That's the first point that needs to be said. The second point is Boeing has not had a good couple of years. In its testimony before the US Senate, the Boeing CEO, as recently as April of 2025, admitted to lapses in security. In fact, I think the phrase he used was serious missteps. So there is a cloud over Boeing as a company. But again, Dr. Paranjape yesterday was saying it's far too early to start pointing fingers at Boeing, saying there's something wrong in the 787. We cannot react from panic. We cannot react from emotion, as emotional as this moment is. So, Group Captain, your thoughts on the 787, this extended surveillance? I think we've all agreed that we disagree enormously with the knee-jerk lack of respect being shown to the pilots who went down with the plane. So I'm not going to bring that up again. I'm just saying that on record also from my own side that it angers me enormously. Having put that on one side for the record, I want to ask you about the questions that are now being raised about the fleet itself, about Boeing. Is that also knee-jerk? Is that also panicky? There are aviation mysteries that have never been solved that haunt us till this day. The Malaysian airline case is a key example. I don't know if this will be another, because I don't know of another example from aviation history. Please correct me if I'm wrong, when a plane has crashed immediately after takeoff.
Madam, I will make 3-4 points. Yes, there was one case where aircraft has got crashed immediately after takeoff. That's different story. One by one, first I would like to come on our beloved minister's statement that we are going to have additional surveillance or 8 aircrafts have been checked. I would have appreciated and would have loved had he spelled down what all things we are going to check based on what all inputs. Because even after detailed inquiry on this aircraft, which with all the experience disposed at my end, I don't foresee final inquiry report to come before within 1 year. Preliminary inquiry may come. So what all things additional surveillance are going to check? Either to the aircraft itself, it looks like an aircraft, or in which all area they are going to check. Based on which all inputs, that would have been appreciated, so that we as the aviation expert also would have zeroed on based on some evidences, based on some past problems, based on some input from OEM, based on some input from other 787 operators. So that was my point one. Point number two, as long as Boeing company itself is there, yes, I also have read in the media that there were quality issue from beginning on 787 during production. And as surprising as one of the quality control engineers suicided after taking the issue on the quality aspects during production of the aircraft, that he was telling a lot of FODs, lot of debris are being induced at the time of assembly. I could buy 2-3 points over there. One, structural joint issue, because none of the aircraft, leave aside the aircraft, even in the car cannot be produced at one single place. We depend on the various vendors. Similarly, aircraft manufacturer also, we depend on so many vendors. On this very aircraft itself, we had a battery issue for which aircraft was grounded for 3.5 months. The battery was found defective. It was getting heated up. In 2 aircraft, it got fired. In 2013-14, the aircraft was grounded. So, and it was a vendor issue. However, if I come back to this particular accident. I have not seen any evidence of structural failure being a cause of this accident.
Hmm.
And I can't foresee that the induced debris at the time of assembling of the engine, which is not within the domain of Boeing. Boeing, when it's a engine department, it's a separate Gen X engine.
But
I can't appreciate it during assembly of the engine if any debris have been left over or anything which
but
will
sir, I
damage
have to.
now.
I have I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
You seem to be explaining that different vendors supply different parts in the making of an aircraft, but the buck has to stop with the company that rolls out the finished product, which I imagine in this case is Boeing. But
Absolutely.
you're also saying that structural reasons you don't think are possible explanations for this crash, which means you don't agree with the dual engine failure theory.
No, ma'am. Structural, what they are two different things. You kindly appreciate structure of a building. When we call structural failure, they are talking basically the wing joint, they are talking basically the fuselage, the joining of the tail plane area, the joining of the wing to the fuselage. Those things, when we talk about structural joints, those things I am talking about. I am not talking about the engine failure because of this thing, the structure
Okay,
on attach.
okay. Okay, so let me take this point to Captain Rai just before I come to you, Aditya. Captain Rai, you heard the minister saying extended surveillance, and Group Captain Bajpai says, "Hang on, the inquiry is going to take up to a year. So what are you surveilling? What are you actually testing for?" Reminding us that the batteries heating up have been a problem in the past, and that problem was addressed and fixed. You've actually flown this aircraft. If someone were to say to you or ask you today, and again, I don't want to cause panic among passengers, do you believe it needs a renewed surveillance? What would you say, Captain Rai?
In the
Okay,
Air Force back then, when I was in the Air Force back then, if any accident took place, there is to order grounding of the fleet and checking each and every aeroplane that everything is okay with the aeroplane. These are all precautionary measures.
yeah,
It is not indicating that there is something wrong with the aeroplane. So
yeah.
this order by by the ministry or the DGCA to check all aeroplanes is just a precautionary measure. Please check the aeroplanes thoroughly once again before they are certified airworthy. So they cannot be it cannot be taken as a very serious issue that there is something seriously wrong with the aeroplane. That is why it has been ordered. It's a kind of a precautionary thing, nothing more than that.
Okay, I have other questions, but let me bring in Dr. Aditya Paranjape so far. Look, what we're hearing is, I don't know. All of you seem to be ruling out bird hits. And I'm going to say that if it was a bird hit, I'm assuming that while the plane was in the air for those few seconds, you would have seen something, some impact of that hit, and you don't actually see that. So I'm just applying common sense and saying probably not. Sabotage, we're all agreeing, not of the kind like a bomb going off, because we don't see that either. It's important to say that the only survivor, the survivor in 11A who jumps out, which is another story by itself, says that he hears a loud sound. He hears a loud sound. I don't know what that sound could be, but he does hear a loud sound. That's his testimony. You are talking about a possible engine, I don't know, engine failure or the engine not producing thrust. Group captain doesn't agree. I actually don't know on engine failure what Captain Rai thinks. We'll get to that. But given everything you've heard so far on the extended surveillance, what do you want to say, Dr. Paranjape?
Right. Yeah, I think I agree with Captain Rai that the extended surveillance can just be a matter of precaution. I mean, there is also the softer side of things, which is as a government. I mean, aviation is a heavily regulated sector, so it's possible that the government just wants to send a signal out that they are doing their best to keep it safe. It's an act of just instilling confidence in the public that things are under control. That if something has gone wrong, we are going to do our best to fix it. And in the short run, all we can do pending data is just take a little more precautions. Of course, I would have liked to also hear just what parameters were being examined in the extended surveillance. I think that goes without saying. But I think it's more a way to just to build up some confidence in the minds of the flying public. All right, coming to the second point though, which was about the loud bang. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a good answer to that, and I don't want to speculate, just given how far speculations have gone in the past few days.
Yeah.
But there's one thing I should add here. Look, this particular passenger who survived the crash has been through an absolutely traumatic episode, right? And again, I'm not a psychologist by training, but occasionally I
But
do end
we
up
don't
listening
know
to-
right now what he's saying. He has to be given time to collect his thoughts, basically.
Exactly. And at this and what psychologists will tell you is that at this point the brain's going to rationalize whatever it's heard. It's going to try and find patterns. It's going to try and find causal relationships, and it's going to try and pick up every single thing it has heard and occasionally even build on it. And that's
Yeah.
the reason why I don't know if I would attach a lot of importance to that specific bit of testimony at this point in time. I'm not saying he's wrong. In fact, as we get more evidence from the flight data recorder, it might be possible to match events that we see on the FDR to his testimony. That can certainly happen. But at this point, whether we want to take it seriously to the point where we act on it, I don't know.
So I want to get Captain Rai here. Group Captain Bajpai, am I right in saying, before Captain Rai responds, that you are leaning towards a cyber attack as the most likely explanation, and you're not convinced of the dual engine failure? Group Captain?
No, ma'am. What I was trying to say, as per the available evidence, all of us are speaking on hypothesis. So I was
Correct.
giving one of that hypothesis. Second hypothesis I was stopped. I wanted to give is that takeoff was normal. After that, this is just a hypothesis. Now, one engine fails. One engine for any reason, which is quite a likely chance. Again, much easier chance with respect to both engine failing simultaneously, which is one in more than million flying hours. So after that, captain asked the co-pilot, kindly take up the landing gear. So instead of taking up landing gear, in a panic, the time is just 10 seconds. In a panic, inadvertently, he takes back the flap. Now, this is just hypothesis. Kindly bear with me. In that condition, adverse condition, high temperature, aircraft fully loaded. Now, aircraft, instead of generating the lift, it starts reducing, and both the engine lost power. This is another hypothesis. Third hypothesis, the sabotage in the form of cyber attack. They have taken control of the aircraft command itself, wherein the flap got auto-retracted and aircraft, instead of ascending, started going down. Now, coming back on 2 points the survivor had raised. One was third sound, and second was he could see green, red, and white light. Green, red, white light, I can simulate to the emergency light and emergency escape path light when there is a total power failure. Now those lights got illuminated. And the third light could be simulated to the ram air turbine, which captain was telling in the beginning. It's correct that when ram turbine comes on, so there is a third noise. It's my perception on the subject.
Okay, that's interesting. That is an interesting way to look at it. I want to bring in, sorry, Aditya, can I come to you after Captain Rai? Just been waiting. Captain Rai, which possible, okay, what would you rule out? Let's talk about what you would eliminate. I know we don't know what's happened, but are there things you would rule out, given that all of you say it was a normal takeoff? It has to suggest that the configuration of the plane was correct, right? Because otherwise the takeoff would not have been as smooth as it clearly is in the videos. So all of you are saying it was a normal takeoff. So we're ruling out incorrect configuration, I'm assuming. What else would you rule out, Captain Rai?
Let me come back to the testimony given by the surviving passenger. What Aditya was talking about, that thud and all that. Now, nobody sits in the aeroplane with a stopwatch and says that after 30 seconds I heard a thud. That's very difficult to say.
That's right. That's right.
Second thing is there is something called retrograde amnesia, which means that in a very scary situation, the brain shuts down and removes that horrible, scary experience from your image. That can also result in, proper discerning of time frame. Okay, I'm not saying that what he talks about should be completely discarded. That thud could be the sound when the airplane hit the building. And he has mistaken that as a thud in the air. But then he also says that lights came on, green and white light. So all these things have to be corroborated based on the data recovered from digital flight data recorder. Those white and green lights, like Captain Bajpai said, could be emergency lights coming on in the cabin. So all this sound and thud and these lights coming on, they have to be correlated with the evidence available. Now, ruling out the possibilities, like you had said that, somebody said that Captain Rai also agreed with Steve. At that time, we were actually thinking of all different possibilities. And what Group Captain Bajpai has said that raising the flaps can actually result into a very catastrophic situation where the lift is immediately lost.
Okay.
Now, why the undercarriage was not raised, whether the person has raised the flap or not, is very difficult to say. Looking at the aeroplane, what has happened in the cockpit can only be decided and concluded after we hear the cockpit voice recorder and the DFDR. So this cannot be conclusively said that, okay, the person raised the flaps by mistake. Why? And the big question is why the undercarriage was left down. There could be a situation where the undercarriage failed to go up.
Yeah.
That is also a possibility. The undercarriage failed to go up because of various reasons. Now,
Right.
coming back to the cyber attack, when we used to fly to European area somewhere in 2023, there were a lot of GPS spoofing.
That's right.
It has happened with me also that flying over Iranian airspace, the air traffic controller has asked me my position. I said, I'm here. He said, no, you are 50 miles left of track, whereas my aircraft was showing that I'm on track. So GPS spoofing has taken place. And I don't know to what extent the cyber attack can, interfere with the aircraft systems and all. These are all technical issues with which experts like Aditya would be able to, throw light on that.
Yeah.
So how secure are the aircraft systems from cyber attack is still to be, seen.
Yeah. So, and on the engine failure theory, you would say what, Captain Rai, before I get Aditya?
Engine failure is a possibility. Yes, it's a great possibility. And if you say that dual engine failure cannot take place, it can happen. Maybe 1 in million, 1 in billion, but it can happen. It's a possibility.
Yeah, because it does frankly look like a 1 in a million kind of air crash. Yes, as all of you pointed out, there have been other crashes after takeoff, but I don't know, in recent memory, Aditya, I'm not able to remember one quite like this, where the plane is just not able to gain altitude.
Yeah. Okay, so let me just add one little point, by the way, about the landing gear, because while the panelists were talking, I just took the liberty of checking a little bit about the RAT system.
Yeah.
So the thing that maybe both of the panelists can confirm is that the RAT takes about 10 seconds to get deployed. And if it is 10 seconds, remember, this whole thing has lasted 30 seconds. And if I had to now use the point where the flight path starts flattening out as the point where you had serious engine problems, the RAT would be deployed possibly closer to 8 to 10 seconds, maybe. That's a conjecture, because until then things seem okay, which means the RAT would not be up and running until 20 seconds into the flight. So which means at least for the first 20 seconds, the landing gear is not going to be raised. And given the amount of time the landing gear takes to go up, that time just doesn't exist here.
So explain this simply. Are you saying that the time wasn't available to fall back on the RAT, even if the engines failed? There was no time available to the pilots?
Yeah, so look, the rat doesn't power the engines. The rat only powers, I mean, occasionally the hydraulics, it powers the landing gear, but it doesn't power the engines. But the thing about the landing gear, I mean, yes, it's abnormal, but what I'm trying to say is it's perfectly explainable without resorting to, any allegations about pilots being incompetent or whatever. It's
That's right.
perfectly traceable back to pretty normal pilot behavior and the constraints of the engineering system and whatever we see here, as a time of flight. That's the first bit. About the cyber systems, again, it's not my place to talk about it. I don't work in that space personally. I don't know. But there's one thing I want to point out is, I mean, we shouldn't be rushing to pin the blame on anybody. I mean, look, as the flying public, we want to, because if you pin the blame, the tendency is to think that we know how to solve the problem, right? That's why we
Yeah.
want to pin the blame. I mean, the idea is not
Yeah.
to criticize Boeing or Air India or whoever. That's not the idea. It's to find out what's gone wrong. But I think also as flying public, and we as engineers, it comes to us a little more naturally. You have to sometimes accept that one in a million events can happen. That's also the point I brought up yesterday.
Yeah.
This plane's been flying. I mean, if we go by Boeing's estimates, that they talked about when they celebrated carrying 1 billion passengers, this plane's been flying about 5 million hours. So 1 in 5 million hours, can something of this thing go wrong statistically? Yes, it can. I'm not saying this should be a reason why we do not investigate in depth. We absolutely should. We should consider all possibilities in the course of the investigation. But, statistically, this can happen, and we have to accept that. And that's the reason
Yeah.
why I'm trying not to, pin the blame and say, okay, look, this is what's likely to have gone wrong. I mean, I was happy to talk about the engines because that's what I can deduce as a very strong possibility based on the flight path, because that's what we can see. There is data to support it from Flight Radar 24. We have ballpark estimates. I mean, as an engineer, I do end up using some of these estimates. So a lot of things start to add up at that level. So I'm happy to say that, look, dual engine out is a very strong possibility based on those calculations. But outside of that, I do not know what's happening in the
If it
systems.
is dual engine out, dual engine out, who does that raise questions for? Then it raises questions for the manufacturer.
Well, actually, everybody. Because so I'll tell you what happens. You have the engine that's manufactured in this case by GE. You have the fuel. You have the fuel pump. You have the fuel supply system, and they are not manufactured. I don't know who the manufacturer is for the fuel supply lines. I mean, I can make an educated guess, but let's not add to the guesses that are already floating around. So any of these systems could have failed and led to the engines being starved of fuel. But we don't know that at this point. So while we could make these hypotheses, we have nothing by way of solid evidence without looking at the FDR to suggest that, look, one of these has failed. We don't know that. All that we know is that most likely the engines went, well, they couldn't produce enough thrust. We know that based on the trajectories, but we can't dig any deeper inside at this point.
Okay, before I take final comments from all of you, one of the things we need to talk about is the on-ground fatalities that have taken place, because they also, while being horribly tragic, raise questions about why there are settlements at all near airports, right? This is something that we really do need to talk about. There are audits in the past that talk about how there's a constant negotiation because people live near airports. Airports want to expand. They want clearer open spaces. Politicians sometimes don't want to move people out and so on. I want to play out a really horrific clip from our colleague on the ground in Ahmedabad from the DNA center. Now, what's happening is that the bodies are so badly charred that the only way to actually understand who is your loved one is through a DNA test. This is a testimony of a woman who lost her mother and her 2-year-old niece. And they were not on the plane. They were on the ground. Take a look.
क्या नाम है दीदी आपका?
मेरा नाम पायल ठाकुर है।
आपका कौन था प्लेन में? आप
प्लेन में नहीं था, मेरी मम्मी वहाँ डॉक्टरों का खाना बनाती थी।
मैस में आपकी
मेस
मम्मी
में,
का?
हाँ।
क्या नाम था उनका?
उनका सरला बेन।
जी।
मेरी मम्मी का सरला। हम कल से ढूंढ रहे हैं ऐसे, पर कुछ भी जवाब नहीं मिल रहा है हमें। कोई ऐसा नहीं बोल रहा है कि यहाँ देखो। हम सब जगह पे, मैंने सिविल में एक एक कोना ढूंढ देखा है कि हम इतने सालों से काम करते हैं, वहाँ पे देखा है मैंने।
तो आपको अभी पता नहीं है आपकी मम्मी किधर है, वो जिंदा है या?
पता नहीं कहाँ है, किस साल में, कैसी है भतीजी और मेरी मम्मी का कुछ भी पता नहीं है।
आपकी भतीजी भी उनके साथ ही?
हाँ, हमारा पूरा परिवार सिविल में काम करता है।
आपकी भतीजी कितने साल की?
2 साल की है।
2 साल की। उसका क्या नाम?
आतिया ठाकुर।
आतिया। अभी आपको उम्मीद है वो बचे होंगे, क्योंकि ये बहुत बहुत दुखद है और बहुत बुरा है, बट
हम तो भगवान की प्रार्थना करते, भगवान बस इस बार हमारे साथ ऐसा कुछ मत करना। हमने इतने सालों से सबका भूखे को खाना दिलाया, सब कुछ किया है, बस एक किसी की दुआ लग जाए और सब लोग अच्छे से बच जाए। हमें एक ही आस है अभी भी कि नहीं कहीं ऐसे हो गए कि सब लोग ढूंढ रहे तो शायद मिल जाए।
उम्मीद है कि वो जिंदा हो।
हाँ, ऐसी उम्मीद है हमें अभी भी। कुछ पता नहीं चल रहा है मेरी मम्मी का, कुछ भी नहीं पता चल रहा है। खाना वैसा का वैसा पड़ा है, सिलेंडर भी वैसा का वैसा, चूल्हा भी हाँ वैसा का वैसा है। उन लोगों को कुछ पता नहीं है।
So it's really painful to watch. This lady's mother was cooking in the kitchen of the medical college where a portion of the plane comes in as it's, I don't know what the technical word is, as it's crashing, is I guess the word I would use. But the question also is, near an airport, in the vicinity of an airport, should there not be more open spaces? I'll start with you, Aditya. We're taking last comments. Go ahead, Aditya.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, now it's happened, so we can talk about it
Yeah,
sort of
yeah,
retrospectively.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, the question is, how do we measure where the open spaces are required? Because let's assume that we agree for the sake of argument that we need more open spaces. Well, what's the basis for it? I mean, what are our failure models for the airplanes? At what point are we saying airplanes can fail and look, we have this open space where they can possibly execute a ditch landing? So, and while it sounds logical on the one hand to do this, to sort of think about it this way, but these are things that are going to need some support from the civil society as well, because it's not just politicians. At some point, civil society members have to say that, look, we have an airport nearby. We've had incidences where we've had these incidents where planes have, now because we've had the crash on takeoff, we've had previously had crashes on landing with some airplanes. So why don't we just create this open space which creates a buffer? Look at BA flight 38, for example. It landed short of the runway. In some of these cases, in where runways have extended thresholds, also you may not always have that kind of space. But I think that's a discussion to be had with the civil society. But what I can tell you is this: if that kind of a discussion gets taken up, then the rest of the engineering can follow. We can talk about failure models. We can talk about what trajectories are going to look like if an airplane fails. Where are the most likely spots where they can ditch, and accordingly, the spaces can be planned. But my take on
Yeah.
it is, at this point, it's something for the civil society to decide based on their judgment, without necessarily resorting to engineering calculations at this point. Once they agree to the principle, we can do the rest.
Unfortunately, I'm not optimistic that there will be consensus on this even now. I think people, because it's so overwhelming to think of it any other way, I think Aam Janta tends to think of this as a black swan event. That's the only way you can continue to live, because if every time you step on a plane, and at this point, full admiration for those who fly them, but as a passenger, anytime you step on a plane, if you keep thinking this may happen, that may happen, there's a kind of paralyzing impact to it. Before I give Captain Rakesh Rai the last word, Group Captain Bajpai, where do you think the investigation will be focused? What are the immediate things we'll be looking at when we decode the flight recorder?
Ma'am, I am very sure DFDR will give a vital inputs for this accident. And then we have to collaborate everything, whatever available evidences, the video of the aircraft, the survivors, this thing, and so many other inputs are to be collaborated with respect to DFDR parameters, actual status. Here, I would like to make one point. Through you, can I ask Captain Rai? I am very sure Captain Rai must have visited the FOCA room of Air India. FOCA is the Flight Operation Quality Assurance place, which records simultaneously all the parameters or most of the parameters which are stored in DFDR. The difference in DFDR is that DFDR remains on board the aircraft. It records the parameter through various transducers installed at different locations inside the aircraft itself. then it transmits automatically these parameters to the FOCA room, subject to aircraft landing gear touches the ground.
Right.
But in this case of the accident, I don't think aircraft landing gear touched the ground, it hit the building. So I am not sure those parameters have been transferred in the FOCA room. If they have been transferred, so then Air India concerned people must be knowing those parameters.
Okay.
Through you,
Okay.
okay, ma'am. Can you go ahead? There must
No,
be
no,
specific.
no. Through you, you want to ask this question, which I will give to Captain Rai. But I want to pick up a couple of comments in our audience
Yeah,
stream.
one more point.
Yes,
One
yes,
more point. You had asked
yes,
about this airport location and the
yes,
populated area, population
yes.
around the airport. Be rest assured, initially when the civil airport and the military airports were constructed, they were constructed quite far away from the populated area from the city. But what has happened due to political reasons, for the social reasons, because people get their bread and butter by staying, by creating the shops and other things, and it gets populated. It
Yeah.
can be handled. It can be handled only through political and civil will. I
So I
respect.
want to, thanks, sir. I want to, before Captain Rai takes a closing comment, Shilpa Murdeshwar says the height of the hostel, she's talking about the medical college that was hit by the plane, can be questioned, but the BGA Medical College was established in 1871. So how far do you want empty land? The airport probably came later. So I just wanted to read that out as a response to what we were talking about. And there's another question from Ravi who says, what about the APU auxiliary power unit in case both engines lost power? Let me give the last word to you, Captain Rai. Where is the investigation going to be focused? How do we avoid finger pointing at the pilots before that? There has to be some awareness created to at least respect whatever happened. I mean, they lost their lives. And, we have to remember that and respect that. Last word to you, closing comment, Captain Rakesh Rai.
As far as blaming the pilot is concerned, it's basically because of lack of knowledge. People do not know what this profession is all about. We need to educate our people, and we need to have more interaction with general public as to what happens inside an aeroplane and how the operations of an airline is carried out. The question which that lady said that the medical college was established in 1871. Was the building also made in 1871 that high?
Yeah, probably not.
Probably
Right.
not.
Exactly.
And what Group Captain Bajpai said, that you build an airport far away from the city.
Yeah.
Then, over a period of time, all kinds of commercial establishments come around the airport. Hotels come around the airport for close proximity.
Yeah.
So how do we tackle that? That has to be done by the civil society, as Aditya very rightly said. There has to be clear-cut policy. The height of the buildings, what kind of buildings can be allowed, what should be the distance. So that is a policy which the government needs to decide. And the airports were not made today. The airports were made long, long ago. And all this population growth around the airport has taken place over a long period of time.
Yeah. Let me end by asking you where you think the investigation will be focused as they take out the flight recorder. What's the first thing they'll be looking at?
The first thing they will most likely look at what has gone wrong with the aircraft. Any system failure in the aeroplane.
Yeah.
And since the takeoff appeared to be a normal takeoff, what has gone wrong in those few seconds with the aeroplane, and then they will come down to what has been the action in the cockpit and what has happened after that, what conversation has taken place in the cockpit. All these things have to be corroborated. So the digital flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder, they have to be matched and seen how things have progressed, what all has happened, and what is the contributory factor to the accident.
Well, we'll leave it there. I've certainly learned a lot from all three of you. I just want to say that my heart goes out to the families of all those on board, the families of all those on the ground, and the families of the pilot, the cabin crew, and the Air India fraternity, which at this moment, I want to share a personal anecdote. I was flying back from Newark to Delhi. The plane, firstly, it was extraordinary to see the pilots and the cabin crew in the immediate aftermath, it hadn't even been hours since the crash, put on absolute professional courtesy, smiling faces, despite the fact that they had lost comrades and colleagues and friends. And then midway through this, our plane was diverted to Vienna because the Iran airspace closed. And we were one of many planes that had to take this diversion. With special DGCA dispensation, the pilots, Captain Sunil Simon and his entire crew, worked well beyond duty hours to get us home. A 15-hour journey turned into a 31-hour journey. And I just want to take this moment to appreciate Air India for showing utmost professionalism at this time of deep trauma. I think we do not appreciate what the fraternity is feeling right now, what the airline is feeling, and that is my personal thank you to the crew and pilots of, if I'm not wrong, AI 106 from Newark to New Delhi that was diverted to Vienna. So really appreciate everything that you all do. I think we forget that the very act of flying is man against nature, science against, science asserting possibilities, but it is still a risk every single day that somebody sits and flies that plane. So thank you very much to Captain Rai and for your service, to Group Captain Bajpai for your service in a different avatar. Of course, Captain Rai has also been a Fauji, and to Aditya for trying to make sense of it all. Thank you, gentlemen, and to our audience, take care and see you soon. Thank you. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.